we're not so good at changing long-term behavior.
How about an example?
Okay. One is the 5-a-day fruits and veggies. Anyone remember this? This was really successful in one way. It was a tremendously large-scale intervention. It was successful at changing our knowledge. We now know that we should eat more fruits and vegetables. It had no effect on behavior. In fact, consumption has gone down since the program started.
Yikes. The challenge of changing behavior long-term was echoed by Todd Rogers, a behavioral scientist at Harvard.
Most treatment effects don't persist, and sometimes they do, and when they do, we have no idea why. And it's hard to predict which will persist and which won't.
The economist David Laibson, also at Harvard, used his speed talk to cover a particular problem he's identified in his classroom: the use and abuse of laptop computers.
There's a huge negative externality for other students in the class. You're sitting there and the person next to you is clattering away and you're distracted by the sound and you're occasionally looking at their screen, and then it makes you want to look at Facebook too. So there's all sorts of problems like that.
It's a classic short-term versus long-term dilemma.
The web offers instant gratification that undermines our very good intentions to get the most out of class, and I think that's all about present bias. We go into the classroom and we are convinced, I am going to be a good student, and suddenly other things become very appealing and very tempting, and we're distracted by those other very gratifying opportunities, and suddenly we've lost 45 minutes of the 50-minute lecture.
Laibson sees this as a smallish problem with potentially huge ramifications.
I mean, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars in colleges, and I think we're not getting much value for our money.
So what are the possible solutions to the laptop dilemma?
We could have a laissez-faire policy. Students are adults. When they reach college age, let them decide. We could have an educational intervention. We could explain, all of these issues. We could ban laptops. I've thought about all these. I don't really love any of these options. So let me offer a different alternative, one that we could actually, as a group, test or think about testing.
And what is this alternative?
In my class at Harvard, we have an opt-in laptop policy.
I caught up with Laibson afterward to hear some more about this. Now, David, you were talking about a project of yours, which prompted for me many questions, which, I have to say, I recorded said questions on my laptop, so I proved the value of my laptop right there. But can you talk about what you were describing and then where you want to go with that?
So I love the point that the laptop was good for you. For a lot of people in a lecture hall, it's actually a distraction. For some people in a lecture hall, it's exactly what they need to take notes, to look up related information. It complements their experience rather than destroying it. And so the problem is, how do we separate the wheat from the chaff?
Could you give like a 60-second summary of your pilot study?
We have two sections in class. One section is for people who don't want to use a laptop and don't want to be around others using a laptop. And then we have another section, which is the laptop section. And our view is that different students should choose one or the other section. Our concern is that if we just let students in real time make the choice, sitting down, what do you want to do right now? A lot of people would flip open their laptop because the temptation is overwhelming. So what we do is tell our students at the start of the semester, it's up to you. Tell us if you want to be in the laptop section, and we'll assign you to that section. And there's a deadline for making that decision. And once you make the decision, it's final. And for everyone else who doesn't opt into the laptop section, they're defaulted into this no laptop section. And what we find is that about 80% of our students stay with the default of being in a non-laptop section. And when we survey our students at the end of the year and say, did this policy of having these two sections facilitate your learning? On a 0 to 10 scale, the average rating is a little over 8. So I think it's about letting people choose for themselves, but letting them choose in a deliberative, thoughtful, careful way at the start of the semester. And then once they've committed to one path or the other, letting that decision have its consequences.
So you want to replicate or enlarge this exact study? Yes?
Yeah. Right now we've got an anecdote. It should be replicated across dozens of courses, and there should be much more careful efforts to actually measure whether it's affecting learning, whether students value this, or whether students feel that this is inappropriate paternalistic behavior on our part.
And so it went for the rest of day one of Behavior Change for Good. Lots of spitballing about methodology, potential research ideas, and more. A few quick observations. I heard more than I would have thought I'd hear about shifting the theoretical framework of decision-making, and less than I would have thought about basic incentives like gamification. But let's be realistic. These are a bunch of top-tier academic researchers. Theoretical frameworks is how they got to where they are. I also heard less than I would have thought about one of the inherent challenges in all behavior change research, that the people most responsive to behavioral nudges are often the ones who already have a pretty decent track record with self-discipline and delayed gratification. It's sort of the behavioral equivalent of pharmaceutical trials using the least sick patients they can find. And one more thing. Every conference I've ever been to gets behind schedule. It's just the way it is. Somehow, I thought this one would be different. I thought that a bunch of people trying to teach the rest of us how to, say, use our time wisely, that they might have some magical time management tricks, but they didn't. Which proves, if nothing else, that these behavioralist wizards are, like us, human. Coming up after the break, day 2 of the conference, drilling down into some experimental ideas, and a visit from Nobel laureate Danny Kahneman, the eminence grise of the behavioralist movement, who offers encouragement, caution, and some inside tricks.
You have to overpromise in order to get anything done.
Freakonomics Radio is supported by Dell. It's Small Business Month, and Dell is celebrating innovators and job creators with special offers. Their dedicated U.S.-based advisors are ready to help with tech solutions tailored to your business, like finding just the right Dell PCs with Intel Core processors. Because your hard work is more than appreciated, it's admired. Learn more by calling 877-BUY-DELL. Freakonomics Radio is supported by ZipRecruiter. When you're hiring, posting your job on just one site isn't enough. So where do you go to find top talent? With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites with just one click. Let ZipRecruiter's powerful technology match your job to the right candidates and use their simple dashboard to find your perfect hire. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within one day. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/freak. That's ZipRecruiter.com/freak.
Freakonomics Radio is supported by Koch Industries. Koch is committed to tackling life's big challenges, including recycling cooking oil into renewable fuel, making cars more energy efficient through aerodynamics, and finding new natural ways to help feed a growing world. See more ways Koch employees are challenging each other and the status quo. Explore new ways to make life even better at KochChallenge.com. That's KOCH challenge.com.
Day 2 of the Behavior Change for Good conference began with breakout sessions. Researchers from different fields talking about designing smart experiments to help people stay fit, eat better, get out of debt, and so on.
My team focused on getting high school students to study more for the SAT.
That's Angela Duckworth.
We went from the mundane to the sublime.
Here's a listen with Duckworth and David Yeager, a psychologist at the University of Texas, Austin.
Maybe if you capitalize on some wave of motivation to study, like right after the PSAT, and get it at a time
when they're not
maybe
conflicted between,
when there's not an academic conflict. Right. One thing I'm seeing emerging is to not fight the tendency to be performance-oriented in the SAT prep, but invite people to be mastery-oriented in their preparation skills.
Is it possible to do a random assignment experiment delivered through Qualtrics and through texting to half of the kids and not the other half?
I think that is possible here, and then that would give you a model for thinking about the content of the text messages, right?
I caught up with Duckworth afterwards.
So we spent a lot of time figuring out how many kids, are they kids from disadvantage? I mean, it was very tactical. But we ended with the sublime, which is, what is the rite of passage to adulthood in America? There really isn't one. And can we actually use this challenge as a way of reframing the transition from high school to college in a way that would actually give kids an on-ramp to that, as opposed to like dropping them into this thing called young adulthood on a college campus somewhere where they have no support.
Okay. And what happens next?
The next steps for our group is that we will prepare a random assignment study for high school seniors who are taking the SAT this October.
And what was Katie Milkman's breakout session about?
My team was diving into an actual study design for a random assignment trial, trying to help people exercise more regularly.
And here's a listen to that. Among Milkman's group were Lauren Eskreis-Winkler, a postdoc fellow in psychology at Penn, and Ayelet Fishbach, a professor of behavioral science and marketing at the University of Chicago.
Also, I know you have some studies where you make it fun by adding music. So why are they finding fun by doing an exercise? Couldn't they just bring music? Or
yeah, that's a good point. We could give them strategies for making workouts fun.
Other ways to make it fun.
Well, they have earbuds, right?
I'm trying to think what the treatment is, but you could imagine we tell them to try these different exercises and we tell them to try doing them while listening to music or audiobooks or watching TV shows.
We could, yes. And the thing that you will find there is you can watch a TV show more easily maybe while biking than running.
Right. Probably also not when swimming.
Not the TV show, but the music.
Yeah, you can listen to music while swimming.
You can?
Yeah.
With earphones?
And I chatted with Milkman after her session. What about making the activity itself more fun or less intimidating? I think one big barrier for people who don't know their way around a gym is all these people with all these machines, they know how to move them. I don't. So how do you make it more fun for someone who's not acclimated?
So we actually decided that our design should have two elements. One element is focusing people either on the fun or on what's most effective. So that would be one thing we'd test, A versus B. The second element would be rewarding people for exploring different activities at the gym and then reporting back to us and seeing if having them go through that coaching process could help them zoom in on what's right for them in a way that would lead them to form a more sustainable exercise habit.
Great. And then concrete details, what happens next?
What happens next is we go back and forth a lot of times on the draft we literally put together in the last hour and a half of materials. And then we do a heck of a lot of piloting to make sure that our questions all make sense. And then we do more piloting, and then we launch.
And you launch with how large a population?
We'll launch with thousands of people, and our aimed for launch date is January of 2018, when people will be benefiting from fresh feelings and New Year's resolutions and eager to sign up for our program that helps them exercise more.
And the partner on this is who?
We have two partners on this, 24-Hour Fitness and Blink Fitness.
As a result of the work on this day and in the weeks to follow, the Behavior Change for Good project would line up a great number of pilot studies that will kick off in early 2018. They would also come up with a few million more dollars to fund their project, and they'd add some other big names to their roster of research scientists. For this first summit, meanwhile, the highlight was undeniable. It was a long chat and Q&A with the psychologist Danny Kahneman.
Danny Kahneman is not only the elder statesman of behavioral science, but he's also our Beyonce. So we were just overwhelmed with joy and gratitude when he said, yeah, I will come and close out this session.
Kahneman's moderator was Max Bazerman, himself a most distinguished scholar. He teaches business administration at Harvard, and he's written many landmark pieces on decision-making, ethics, and negotiation.
By the way, I'm nervous. Somehow interviewing Danny makes me nervous.
You're making me nervous.
Bazerman began with a brief overview of Kahneman's research, most of it done with his late collaborator, Amos Tversky. The two of them were the subject of Michael Lewis's book, The Undoing Project, which Lewis discussed on this program in an episode called The Men Who Started a Thinking Revolution.
It is incredible to me how many different spheres of human existence these guys' work has touched and influenced.
Now, Max Bazerman again.
I realize that most of the people in this room don't remember the 1970s.
At least not clearly.
But there was a time when, after your 74 paper, where psychologists became acutely aware of your work. I think economists weren't paying too much attention. and then eventually the behavioral economics movement starts. But throughout the last millennium, this was kind of more of an academic literature. And in this millennium, we've seen this robust movement into the real world by groups that do research like the members here, by the behavioral insight teams. How do you sort of explain the shift from academic to intense real world interests?